Hey everyone, welcome back to another devlog for Dark Umbra. I'm Codeboy Liam, and today we're going to be looking at how we've been working on the enemies in our game, specifically on spawning and enemy variety. For most of the game's development, we've just been spawning in one enemy at a regular interval that would speed up as you play through a level. This didn't end up being too fun, as every few seconds you'd just stop and kill whatever enemy spawned, or even just run right past them. So the first thing we did was increase the amount of enemies, and decrease how often they spawned. And this helped, but it still felt off and didn't have the growth of challenge that we wanted. So next we looked at slowly ramping up how many spawned, as well as buffing up the starting health of enemies. So at the beginning of a level, it would take a good amount of hits for the player to kill an enemy, but by the end of it, they'd be cutting down waves of them with only a few swings. For the spawn rate, we decided to assign enemies a cost value, with tougher enemies costing more points, and every time the game decided to spawn a group of enemies, it's given some points to buy them with. How many points is given depends on the intensity rating, which increases the longer you play within a level. The game then randomly selects an enemy type, and if it can afford it, spawns them somewhere near the player. It'll keep going through this pattern of selection and spawning until it runs out of points, at which point it will wait a random amount of time and then start the whole process again. The whole thing was looking a lot more fun. With the health buffs, smaller amounts of enemies felt more meaningful, and the amount of enemies spawned ramped up in a natural way. But there was just one problem. It was still way too easy for the player to just mow through the hordes of enemies. Even if we stayed at level 1 and cranked the spawn rate to max, all they had to do was hold forward and spam the attack button and nothing could stop them. So what could we do? At this point, all the enemies just slowly approached, and any attack from the player would send them flying away. But just giving all the enemies some resistance to knockback only made things feel worse, as when the screen was filled with loads of enemies, it was near impossible to tell which enemies were one hit away from being thrown into the sun, and which ones were going to tank right through your attacks and send you to an untimely death. After going back to the drawing board, we decided we need some new enemies. Some real disruptors that force the player to engage on their terms instead of being able to slaughter everything with their eyes closed. So off Art Boy Alex went into his mystical art cave, where after many days and nights he returned with 3 new and deadly enemies. The first of which is the animated armor, a hulking mass of metal manufactured to ruin your day. He's slow and lumbering, but completely immune to any knockback. Any player who cares for their life will think twice before underestimating him. And if just one wasn't enough, his green companion is perhaps even deadlier, with a large axe, perfect for throwing. Next we have the bulb shooter. Plant shooter? Plant bulb? A stationary plant that locks on from a distance and fires an explosive pellet towards the player. This enemy forces the player to either dance around the explosives or dive into enemy territory to take out the source. And finally we have the harpy, a winged monstrosity that prowls the mountainous snowy peaks. It hovers around, searching for prey, and after locking onto the player, chases them down before shooting a volley of pinions at you. Apex predators these are not, however, as one solid hit from the player will knock them out of the sky. With these updated systems and new enemies included, the combat feels not only more engaging, but also more challenging in a way that feels fair. While much improved, things aren't perfect yet. Waves feel a little too small for too long, but can feel almost overwhelming by the end of a level, so we'll be continuing to tweak things until we find that perfect balance. So I hope you enjoyed this look at the game. Hit all the buttons below if you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all next time for another Dark Umbra devlog.